My grandson David experienced his first winter this year. The weather report said it was a record cold day, and I couldn't help but worry about David and his mother, Yvonne. I hoped they hadn't gotten sick from the cold. That night, I sent Yvonne a message on my smartphone asking, "Are you and the baby okay? Not catching a cold?" But even though I sent it 2 or 3 times, there was no reply, not even a read receipt. She's always been so responsible, so I hoped she wasn't overdoing it. After waiting another hour, I tried calling, but there was no answer. Worried something serious had happened, I quickly put on my thick jumper and rushed out to drive to my son's family apartment. There was no response when I rang the intercom, and fearing the worst, that Yvonne had collapsed inside, I had the building manager open the door. The apartment was dark, with only light from the street lamps seeping in. Groping along the wall, I searched for the light switch. I fumbled for it several times, but the lights wouldn't turn on. "What's going on here?" I thought, feeling a mix of anxiety and irritation. With no other option, I used my smartphone's flashlight to look around. "Yvonne, are you there? Could they be out?" Just as I was about to leave, I thought I heard a baby's cry from the bedroom. "Yvonne, are you there?" I quickly headed to the bedroom. There, I found Yvonne shivering from the cold but desperately wrapping newborn David in a sheet to keep him warm. What happened? To my shock, Yvonne's once long and proud black hair was now chopped off, almost completely shaved. "This is terrible. What happened here?" "My name is Mary Smith. I'm 61 years old. I've worked as a hairstylist for many years, running a salon out of my home. Chatting casually with my regulars during their appointments has always been the highlight of my day. The salon was originally started by my husband and me. However, he passed away from cancer when he was young, not long after our son Harry was born. Despite the challenges, I raised Harry on my own, but Harry didn't make it easy. He often skipped school and got into trouble when he did attend. After graduating high school, he didn't continue his education, instead spent his days hanging out in town. I often wondered if he felt inferior because he didn't have a father around or if I wasn't a good enough mother. I always worried about Harry's future but never found an answer. So when Harry suddenly said one day, "I want to be a hairstylist," I was so surprised I pinched my cheek, thinking I was dreaming. "What's gotten into you?" I asked. "Hairstylists are popular with the ladies, right?" Harry replied with a smirk. "I guess kids do grow up watching their parents, huh?" Regardless of the reason, I decided to take a positive view of my son showing interest in his future for the first time. Harry successfully graduated from cosmetology school and started working as an apprentice at a senior salon. That's where he met Yvonne, who would later become his wife. Harry was smitten with her at first sight, and after a strong pursuit, he announced to me with a confident smile, "I've decided to marry this girl," introducing me to Yvonne. "Nice to meet you. I'm Yvonne. You are a hairstylist too, right? I look forward to learning from you." Yvonne, with her long black hair and bright smile, was a wonderful woman. "I look forward to that," I replied, instantly liking her. A year after their marriage, Harry expressed his desire to start his own salon. Though he hadn't been an apprentice for long, he seemed to have gained a lot of confidence as a hairstylist. "I want to have my own place and prove my skills." Honestly, I was a bit worried. I knew from my experience that it's not easy for a newcomer to make it on their own in this industry, but I couldn't ignore the earnest look in Harry's eyes as he talked about his dream. "How much do you have saved up?" I asked. He showed me his bank book with a troubled look and a sigh. Despite having a steady income, he was spending just as much as he earned. With this pattern, he was far from having enough to start his own business. Harry had been squandering most of his earnings on leisure. Perhaps I should have advised him to give up then, but I smiled and said, "Don't worry about the money." Indulging him was maybe my way of making up for the loneliness he felt growing up without a father. Truth be told, I hadn't touched the life insurance money left by my late husband. "It's for Harry. You forgive me, right?" I whispered to my husband's portrait. One of my regulars was knowledgeable in real estate, so I consulted with her. "That place would be perfect," she said. It was a property that had been used as a barber shop until half a year ago, but the owner had retired due to old age. The location wasn't bad, and she thought it might be just right for Harry's new start. During the renovation, one of my regulars said, "Use my husband. He just lazes around the house on his days off anyway." Another chimed in, "My son's studying architecture in college and is home for the summer break. He can help out too, get some hands-on experience." Thanks to their help, the construction went smoothly. Once we got the health department's approval, the salon opened in no time. I never imagined I could set up my own business so quickly. You should thank everyone. It's not something you could have done alone. I know. I'm grateful to you, Mom, Harry said. Then I handed Harry the bank book containing the remainder of his father's inheritance. The purchase and renovation costs were lower than expected, so there was still more than half left. This is a gift from your father to you. Use it wisely for business expenses and don't you dare waste it. Yeah, I'm not a kid. I get it, Harry said, chuckling in annoyance. Don't worry, I'll keep a close eye on Harry to make sure he doesn't spend the money foolishly, Yvonne said with a bright smile. Her words made me laugh. With Yvonne's help, I didn't need to worry about interfering any further. I optimistically decided to watch over their business from a distance. But soon, I realized my optimism was misplaced. Yvonne occasionally visited my salon to update me on their progress, and each time her expression grew more somber. 3 months after Harry's salon opened, she confided, "Harry's not putting his heart into the work." What? Harry, why? He was so enthusiastic at first. Sure, he thought his skills would bring in customers, but within a month, he stopped smiling and began treating customers coldly. As a result, our reputation has plummeted and customers have stopped coming. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Harry had wanted his own salon so badly. What had changed in such a short time? Harry thought that being a good hairstylist was all it took, but running a salon is more than that. Yvonne sighed. She was right. Business doesn't work on the quality of your work alone. Customer service plays a huge role in success. It seemed Harry was missing that fundamental understanding. So, what's Harry doing now? I asked. He's frustrated about the lack of customers and spends his days drinking. If he doesn't get his act together, we'll lose even more clients. Right now, I'm handling the customers we do have. But if our reputation keeps dropping, the business will only get worse, Yvonne explained, looking like she was on the verge of tears. I felt the same way. All right, I'll have a serious talk with him next time I see him. Thank you so much, Yvonne said, bowing deeply before brushing back her long black hair. Your hair is always so stunning, I commented, trying to lighten the mood. I started growing it out in middle school, she said proudly. Being that long, any particular reason? Are you familiar with hair donation? Yvonne looked at me earnestly. Hair donation? I think I heard about it at a hairstylist's meeting, but I don't know much about it. Yvonne's eyes sparkled as she explained, it's about making wigs from real hair for children who've lost their hair due to congenital diseases, illness, or accidents. I've been growing my hair to donate to organizations involved in this. Isn't it wonderful to be able to help someone? I read an article about an actress who was doing it and thought maybe I could do that too. Wow, that's really admirable, especially for someone as young as you, I said, overwhelmed by Yvonne's passion. 6 months into her marriage with Harry, Yvonne got pregnant. She's always been so conscientious, always pushing herself too hard. When I'm not looking, Yvonne, this is the most crucial time. You really shouldn't overdo it, I repeatedly warned her. She'd just lightly laugh and say, don't worry, I'm taking it easy, consulting with the baby in my belly. But in reality, Yvonne worked at the salon right up until the last month of her pregnancy, supporting the family while Harry's attitude worsened. Every time Yvonne updated me, I felt my own shortcomings as a mother. One day, I finished work early and decided to check on their salon. I ran into Harry just as he was about to leave. Where are you going? Out for a drink. There won't be any more customers today anyway, he said nonchalantly, laughing off the situation. The lack of customers had become normal for Harry, and he wasn't even trying to improve things anymore. You're about to become a father, you know. Harry just waved his hand dismissively and hopped on his motorcycle. We're not done talking. Think about Yvonne for once. Yeah, I'll do that when I feel like it. He laughed and sped off. Inside the salon, Yvonne was cleaning the floor. Today we managed to get just one customer, she said, smiling brightly despite looking exhausted. Are you eating properly? You need to get enough nutrition. Don't worry about me. It's not just about you, it's for the baby, I said sternly, making sure she understood the gravity of the situation. Yvonne teared up a bit and thanked me. At times like this, a father should be there to support her. I wanted to shout at Harry, who was nowhere to be found. Yvonne told me the salon wasn't doing well and that Harry was spending money recklessly every night. Giving that babe book to Harry was a mistake. I regretted my decision. Despite being busy, Yvonne never neglected her hair care. Gently stroking her belly, she said, "I want to teach my child the joy of helping others." That's when I realized I wanted to support her since my son wasn't of much help. I decided to assist Yvonne at their apartment. "I'm always sorry to trouble you." "Don't worry about it. Just focus on the baby," she replied. It was my fault for not raising my son right. Because of that, Yvonne was suffering. Perhaps it was my way of atoning for my sins. At least at the end of summer, Yvonne went into labor earlier than expected and was rushed to the hospital. Harry was nowhere to be found, unreachable. I kept sending him messages, but there were no replies, not even read receipts. What on earth is he doing at a time like this? Yvonne's parents had passed away, so I was the only one who could be there for her. "Don't worry, Yvonne, I'm here," I kept encouraging her as she bravely faced childbirth. After a long and difficult labor, I was overwhelmed by the sound of the baby's cries. "He's born? You did it, Yvonne," I said, moved to tears. But Harry, who should have been there, never showed up. My grandson David was experiencing his first winter. The weather report said it was a record cold day. No wonder it was so chilly that I had trouble getting out of bed. My first thoughts were of Yvonne and newborn David. I hoped they weren't affected by the cold. Worried, I sent a message to Yvonne that night. "Are you and the baby okay? Haven't caught a cold?" But even after sending 2 or 3 messages, there was no response, not even a read receipt. I was concerned that Yvonne might be too ill to move. She's always been so responsible. I hope she's not overdoing it. After waiting another hour, I tried calling again, but the result was the same. Something's not right. Without a second thought, I put on my thick jumper and rushed out to their apartment. When I arrived, the place was engulfed in darkness. It's not uncommon for families to travel abroad during the holidays, but I hadn't heard anything about a trip from Yvonne and Harry, and they likely couldn't afford it anyway. I rang the intercom, but there was no response, fearing Yvonne might have collapsed. I immediately asked the building manager to open the door. "I'll wait outside. Please let me know if there's anything," I told the manager before stepping inside. The apartment was dark, the only light coming from the street lamps outside. I remembered the light switch was right by the entrance. Relying on my memory, I groped for the light switch on the wall. But no matter how many times I flipped it on and off, the lights didn't respond at all. What's going on here? I thought, feeling a mixture of anxiety and irritation. With no other option, I used my smartphone's flashlight to illuminate the room as I stepped inside. "Yvonne, are you here?" I called out in the living room, but there was no answer. Maybe they had just gone out. Just as I was about to leave, I thought I heard a faint cry of a baby from the bedroom. "Yvonne, are you in there?" I quickly headed toward the sound. There was Yvonne, shivering from the cold, desperately wrapping newborn David in a sheet to keep him warm. What happened here? When I shone the light on her, I was shocked to see that her once long, proud black hair had been roughly cut off, almost to the scalp. Her eyes, red and swollen from crying, looked at me helplessly. "This is terrible. How did this happen?" I took off my jumper and draped it over Yvonne. "It's okay now. Just tell me what happened as much as you can." Yvonne began to speak slowly. She said that Harry had continued his daily escapades even after David was born. Eventually, they couldn't pay the electric bill anymore, and Yvonne, unable to bear it any longer, Yvonne scolded Harry. She had just wanted him to be more responsible as a father, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. In a fit of rage, Harry grabbed a pair of practice hair-cutting scissors and started cutting off Yvonne's hair. At first, Yvonne tried to resist, saying, "Stop it," but fearing any further resistance might accidentally harm David, she stopped resisting. Harry laughed mockingly, saying, "Now you won't be able to show your face in public." I was speechless at my son's cruel actions. "Why didn't you tell me it had gotten this bad?" I asked. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry," Yvonne apologized, blaming herself again. "No, Yvonne, it's not your fault. You're not the one to blame here. It's Harry. You did nothing wrong." I knew Yvonne hadn't confided in me because she didn't want to worry me. I hugged her tightly, tears streaming down my face. The whole situation was a result of my overindulgence in raising Harry. My heart burned with shame and anger at my own failings and my son's inability to empathize with others. Taking a deep breath, I called Harry. "Hey, Mom, long time no talk." "What's up?" he answered, calling all of a sudden. Just wanted to hear your voice. How's everything over there? Are Yvonne and David doing okay? Of course, everyone's fine and doing well. I've been calling home, but no one's picking up. Where are you now? There was a brief pause in his voice, as if he was concocting an excuse. Actually, we're a family of 3 in Hawaii. We'll be back next week. Hawaii, huh? That sounds nice, I responded, though I knew he was blatantly lying to me. What had I been doing all these years, taking care of Harry after losing my husband at a young age? I worked non-stop as a hairstylist. It was all to raise Harry into a respectable person. When he expressed a desire to become an independent hairstylist, I fulfilled his wish without hesitation. Yet Harry carelessly squandered the inheritance his father left, using it for his own pleasures and even mistreating his wife and child. My expectations for Harry turned into profound disappointment. What would you like as a souvenir? I'll bring you something nice, Harry asked. Anything's fine. You're coming back next week, right? Safe and sound, I replied. Hey, Mom, you sound a bit off. Is something wrong? Harry seemed to sense something, but I ended the call without responding. I informed the building manager waiting outside of my plans and decided to take Yvonne and David back to my house. Then I started making calls to every place I could think of. A week later, Harry called me cheerfully, announcing that he had just landed at the airport. I'm back, Mom, and I've got souvenirs for you, he said, pretending to be the caring son. But my heart was no longer deceived by his act. That's nice to hear, I replied in a flat tone, though Harry didn't seem to notice anything unusual. About an hour later, a taxi pulled up in front of the apartment. Harry, clearly having enjoyed his solo trip to Hawaii with distinct tan lines from sunglasses around his eyes, unloaded a bunch of luggage from the trunk. He took out his keys, expecting to enter the apartment. Where his wife and son should be waiting, he must have thought that once he inserted and turned the key, the door would open immediately. However, no matter how many times he tried, the key wouldn't fit the lock. What's going on here? He exclaimed in frustration. I approached him quietly from behind and asked with a smile, Did you enjoy your trip to Hawaii? Though my heart was boiling with anger. Mom, you're here, Harry said, relieved to see me, misunderstanding the situation. Listen, Mom, I just got back and tried to enter the house, but the key won't fit. It must be Yvonne's prank. Punishing me for going on a trip alone, he tried to paint himself as the victim, blaming Yvonne, leaving Yvonne, who just gave birth, and newborn David behind. What were you doing? I told you I was in Hawaii with my family, Harry protested, suddenly panicking. Didn't you just say you went on the trip alone? I pointed out the contradiction. Harry was at a loss for words. You really had the nerve to lie about taking a family trip to Hawaii. Yvonne was here with the electricity cut off, shivering in the cold, holding David close to protect him, and to think she cherished her long hair, and you just cut it off mercilessly. Don't you feel any remorse as a human being? I guess I messed up there, but right now I just want to get inside the house. It's freezing in Japan, Harry replied, rubbing his arms theatrically, showing no sign of remorse. The cold Yvonne and David endured is nothing compared to this. Plus, you no longer have a home here. I've already canceled the lease on the apartment. It's time you find your own place to live, I stated firmly. Cancel the lease. What? Why would you do something like that without asking me? Harry protested, suddenly panicking. But the apartment was leased under my name after all. I couldn't just stand outside and continue this conversation, so I took Harry to a nearby coffee shop to talk further. Harry sipped his coffee silently, probably not even tasting it. He kept glancing between me and his coffee with a pale face. You were so strapped for cash that you couldn't pay the electric bill. Did you manage to go to Hawaii? I said, watching Harry grimace. Finally, he began to spill his selfish reasoning. He admitted that right from the start of his business, he was showing off to friends and women he picked up at the salon, spending his father's inheritance on his antics. He knew such spending would quickly deplete any fortune, but after getting a taste of the power of money, he continued his lavish lifestyle even after the inheritance ran out, racking up debts to buy gifts and take trips. You're quite the big spender, aren't you, especially for a failing business? I remarked. Don't worry. I'm a professional hairstylist. Once I get serious clients, they will come flooding in and I'll be able to support my family, Harry replied with unfounded confidence. I looked at him coldly. Your salon? I've already sold it, all the equipment too. It's too late to get anything back. I shattered his baseless confidence. That's a lie. Why would you do something like that? Harry's face turned red as he slammed his hand on the table. Oh, you were planning to continue with the salon? I thought you had abandoned it since you left everything to Yvonne. Besides, I bought the building and land in my name. You have no right to complain now, I retorted. But I was just trying to attract customers. I had it all planned out. Harry's eyes looked like those of a child about to burst into tears. If you're so confident in your skills, you should be able to start over from scratch, I said coldly, then left the coffee shop after placing money for the coffee on the table. A month passed, Yvonne and I avoided any contact with Harry. But unpleasant rumors inevitably reached my ears after I pushed him away. Harry apparently ran to his friends begging for money, but they were the kind who gathered around him for his money. Naturally, nobody was willing to help a financially drained Harry. He even got reported to the police for stalking some of the women he picked up at his salon. Although he only received a stern warning from the police, the lack of support from his acquaintances hit him hard, and he completely disappeared from our lives. He's probably living alone now in fear of harsh debt collectors. All this is the consequence of his own actions. My anger towards Harry isn't just about his reckless spending. What's unforgivable is how he neglected Yvonne and David, pushing them into hardship, and above all, cutting off Yvonne's long hair, which she had grown out for years for a noble cause, thereby potentially robbing unknown children of a brighter future. As a fellow hairstylist, I could never forgive Harry's actions. It will take a long time for Harry to truly understand the emotional pain Yvonne has endured. Yvonne herself never speaks of her hurt, but it's clear she's not unscathed. She appears to be keeping her feelings bottled up, probably not wanting to worry me. Wanting to do something to help, I reached out to my hairstylist friends and had a special wig made for Yvonne. It won't make up for my son's wrongs, but please use this, I said. Thank you, Mom, Yvonne said with a smile, though tears were streaming down her cheeks. Using my aching back as an excuse, I asked Yvonne to help out at the salon. She threw herself into the work, seemingly trying to forget her emotional scars. Hello, David, a regular greeted, and David in his cradle burst into giggles. Now some customers even come to the salon just to see him. He's like a little mascot, a baby that brings in good fortune. Yvonne, regaining her strength both physically and emotionally, has started the process of divorcing Harry. Seeing Yvonne's smile makes us all feel like we've shed 20 years, but it's true. Yvonne and David have brightened up the salon considerably. Attracted by Yvonne's cheerful atmosphere, more and more mothers with young children have become regulars. Let's have a great day today. Hi, how are you? Now the salon is filled with smiles again. In a quiet corner, David is peacefully sleeping, his cute little snores filling the air.
What's going on with you two? I exclaimed as I walked in from work, only to find my husband and daughter sprawled on the living room floor. What's wrong? I rushed to their side, panic rising in my chest. They were both in the midst of a seizure, struggling to breathe. Without hesitation, I dialed for paramedics, and they were swiftly transported for treatment. As we rushed to the hospital, I was bombarded with questions, but all I could offer were fragmented observations. I was as clueless as anyone about what had caused this sudden collapse. In the hospital, as the doctors tended to them, I was ushered into a separate room, heart pounding with dread. Are they okay? I asked, desperation lacing my voice. They'll be fine, the doctor assured me, especially Bonnie. The gravity of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. My strength seemed to evaporate at the doctor's words. From that moment, I was thrust into a whirlwind of uncertainty. My name is Wendy, and for the past 5 years, I've been married to Harley, living with our daughter Bonnie. I met Harley during my days as a post office clerk. He frequented the office to send out his handmade items for sale on a flea market app. What began as mere clerical exchanges gradually evolved into conversations, and soon I learned his name. After one routine transaction, Harley left me a piece of paper, hastily scrawled with his phone number. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. Eventually, curiosity won over, and I dialed the number. Hello! His voice on the other end was a mix of surprise and anticipation. Is this Wendy? He asked. Yes, it's me. Did you give me your number? I couldn't help but chuckle. I had been jittery before making the call, but somehow, Those nerves dissipated as soon as we began talking. Before I knew it, an hour had flown by, and Harley casually asked me out on a date for the following week. "Next week sounds perfect," I replied, feeling a surge of excitement. "I'm looking forward to it." And so our dates became a regular occurrence. With each outing, we grew closer, our connection deepening organically. It wasn't long before our companionship blossomed into something more meaningful. There were no grand declarations of love, just a gradual understanding between us. When I was 26 and Harley was 28, he proposed. My response was an enthusiastic yes. I envisioned a blissful married life ahead of us, but reality had other plans. "I'm glad your parents were so welcoming," Harley remarked as we walked towards my childhood home. "I hope mine will be too." "I'm not so sure about that," I admitted, "but let's hope for the best." As we entered, my parents greeted us warmly, offering their congratulations. It was a heartwarming moment until my sister, Meryl, appeared. "Did you forget to tell Mr. Harley about me?" she teased, catching me off guard. "I'm sorry, I should have explained," I stammered, feeling a pang of guilt for not preparing Harley. Once the confusion was cleared up, pleasantries were exchanged, but little did I know, this encounter would unravel into a nightmare. Afterwards, my sister and I discussed the situation. Our relationship had never been particularly close, especially after I left home to support our ailing mother. I had sacrificed my education fund for her medical expenses, a decision she couldn't comprehend. I harbor no regrets about the choice I made. Sacrificing my education fund for my ailing mother was a decision I stand by. However, Meryl didn't take kindly to it. That moment became a turning point in our relationship. Despite having walked similar paths until then, from that juncture, we drifted apart. Our communication dwindled, and we seldom kept in touch. Even during occasional visits home, we made a point to avoid each other as much as possible. That dynamic remained unchanged. Yet strangely, she seemed genuinely pleased about my marriage. "I thought this might break the ice," I remarked, attempting to lighten the tension. "That's nice. I wish I could find someone like Harley," she mused wistfully. "I'm sure you'll meet someone wonderful," I reassured her. But her response caught me off guard. "Actually, I think he may have already appeared," she hinted with an enigmatic smile that lingered in my mind. And so our married life began. With the arrival of our daughter, we reached the pinnacle of happiness. However, as time passed, subtle changes crept into our lives. Harley started coming home unusually late and began venturing out more frequently, even on holidays. Then, tragedy struck. Upon returning from work one day, I found both my husband and daughter lying unconscious in the living room. Panic surged through me as I rushed to their side, calling for help. Paramedics arrived swiftly, whisking them away for treatment. "What happened?" I asked frantically as they were taken to the hospital. "I don't know," I confessed, my mind reeling with fear and confusion. At the hospital, after hours of agonizing wait, the doctor finally called me aside. "Are they okay?" I asked, bracing myself for the worst. "They're stable now," the doctor assured me, "but they've suffered from acute nicotine pesticide poisoning." Relief flitted through me, but it was short-lived as the gravity of the situation sank in. Caught in a whirlwind of emotions, I found myself grappling with an unexpected turn of events. "I am sorry," I mumbled, struggling to process the ordeal. I was taken aback by the diagnosis. "What is acute nicotine pesticide poisoning?" I inquired, my voice trembling with worry. "It's a poisoning caused by ingesting an ingredient found in pesticides," the doctor explained. Symptoms include dizziness, convulsions, and difficulty breathing. Dread gripped me as I absorbed the severity of the situation. The doctors bombarded me with questions, probing for any clues about what could have caused it. But I was at a loss. I couldn't even recall what they had eaten before I arrived home. They were admitted to the hospital for further examination, but the next day brought a new wave of distress. Police officers arrived at our home. "What's going on?" I demanded, my heart racing with anxiety. "This case appears to be more than just an accident," One officer stated, "We'll be investigating it as a potential crime. Can you tell us exactly how you found them?" Their scrutinizing gazes made me uneasy. It was clear they harbored suspicions, though I couldn't fathom why. Nevertheless, I cooperated with their inquiries, hoping to dispel any doubts. During the search, an officer discovered pesticides in our trash can. "I don't know anything about this," I protested, genuine confusion clouding my mind. "I don't remember buying it." Despite my protests, I was escorted to the police station for further questioning. I reasoned that fleeing would only deepen their suspicions. At the station, they took my fingerprints, which were later matched to those found on the pesticide container. I was detained pending the results. Anxiety gnawed at me as I awaited the outcome. When the results came back, the officer's words struck me like a blow. "Your fingerprints match those on the pesticide," he declared. "You're now a suspect in an attempted murder case." I was stunned. How could this be? I couldn't comprehend why my fingerprints were on the pesticide, let alone why I would harm my own family. As I sat in the interrogation room, my mind raced with confusion and fear. The interrogation stretched on, each question digging deeper into my actions on that fateful day. It started like any other day. I began, my voice trembling. I went to work at the post office as usual. After my usual lunch at a nearby cafe, which lasted about an hour, I returned home. I recounted to the officer. He seemed satisfied, but then he asked about the day before. That afternoon, I went to a nearby supermarket and bought a cake, I explained. After that, I went straight home. The officer then presented me with a laptop. "Take a look at this," he said, showing me a video clip from a surveillance camera at a store. In the footage, a woman stood in front of a shelf stocked with pesticides. "Is that not you in the video?" the officer inquired. My heart skipped a beat as I scrutinized the screen. "What is this?" "Why, it's me," I gasped. But then realization dawned on me. "No, wait, this is not me." The officers exchanged incredulous glances. "Are you sure?" one asked cautiously. I pointed to the screen, where I noticed a detail. "Look here," I urged, indicating a mole near the woman's mouth. "I don't have a mole. This isn't me. It's my twin sister, Meryl." The revelation stunned even the police. "Your twin sister." They echoed in disbelief. As they reviewed the evidence, they found footage of me at the supermarket wearing the same clothes as the woman in the video. However, no one outside my family would know if I had left the house dressed like that. "It all makes sense now," I murmured. That's what it meant. Concern flooded me as I realized the implications. "What has happened to my husband?" I inquired anxiously. "If he's out of the hospital and back at home, please check on him immediately. I believe he's been seeing my sister." The officer looked taken aback. "How can you be so sure?" Taking a deep breath, I explained, "Because they're having an affair. They're trying to frame me. But your husband is a victim too, isn't he? That way, suspicion would be diverted." The gravity of the situation seemed to dawn on the police. "We'll need to investigate further," the officer conceded. "I understand," I replied. "But please check on both of them. It'll reveal everything." I understood that I was being detained. Typically, I would have been arrested immediately, but they decided to hold off on my arrest, recognizing the significance of my testimony. It felt like I was hanging on by a thread. 2 days later, I was summoned back to the interrogation room. "As you suspected, we looked into your husband and found evidence of an affair," the officer informed me. "We spoke to him, and he confessed to everything." "I'm sorry about this," the officer continued. "It was our oversight." For the time being, I was exonerated, but the ordeal was far from over. The betrayal by Harley and Meryl cut deep, especially considering they had implicated my young daughter. I knew I had to confront Harley. "You've done a despicable thing," I told him, struggling to contain my anger. "I can't believe you involved Bonnie in this to frame me. Meryl must have been behind this." Indeed, it turned out that Meryl had orchestrated the entire scheme. She had suggested preparing pesticides to frame me as a murderer. Harley, under her influence, had bought the pesticide and laced the cake with it while I was away at work, just as I had come to visit him. "So, where is Meryl?" I demanded. "I don't know," Harley confessed. "I couldn't reach her before the police took me. She must have run away." "You'll pay for your crimes," I warned him. "You're not getting away with this." As expected, Meryl had disappeared, but the police eventually found her hiding out at a man's home she had met through a dating service. She was taken to the police station, where she confessed to everything. I rushed to the police station to confront her. "Meryl, why did you do this to me?" "Because I've never liked you since you left," she spat back. Then she revealed her resentment, explaining how she felt inferior to me for sacrificing my education for our family's sake. Despite the pain and betrayal, I couldn't help but feel a pang of pity for my sister. Her negative feelings towards me had festered over time, culminating in incidents like this one. "Was that why you approached Harley?" I asked, struggling to comprehend her motives. "I just thought that if I slept with your husband, you would despair," she confessed coldly. "When he came to greet me at the wedding, I knew I could manipulate him." In other words, she didn't choose Harley for who he was. She chose him because he was my husband. "He said he was going to be with you when I was gone. That stupid man had a crush on me. I just made it easy for me to take advantage of him," she continued, devoid of remorse. "I can't forgive Harley, but still, he was just being used by her." Despite the betrayal, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pity for Harley. "Why did you target Bonnie?" I demanded, struggling to contain my anger. "Of course, it's because she's your daughter," she retorted, callously confirming my suspicions. "Well, whatever the reason, what you did is unforgivable. You'll pay for it for the rest of your life," I vowed, my voice trembling with anger. With those words, she was taken away. The trial of Harley and Meryl commenced. My husband was accused of framing me for attempted murder and faced numerous charges. In the end, he was sentenced to prison, including payment of alimony. Meryl, too, faced trial, and despite her execution, she would soon serve her sentence and come out. However, even if they atoned for their crimes, the scars of their actions would linger. They would forever be labeled as ex-convicts. Meanwhile, my parents offered to move in with us. "Would you and Bonnie like to come live with us?" my mother proposed. "I think your mom would be happy if you did." Though hesitant at first, I accepted her offer for my mother's sake, who was exhausted from the ordeal. With my mother's recovery and Bonnie's cheerful presence, our new life together began. From now on, the four of us would reside in a new house, finding happiness together. My name is Maria Dalton, and I am about to turn 27 this year. I've been married to my husband for 5 years now, and we have a son named Martin who just turned 4. Initially, after tying the knot, I worked as a full-time employee, but now I'm working part-time at the same company. My husband is 3 years older than me at 30. I was initially swept off my feet by Kevin Carlton's passionate gestures, which ultimately led us to date and eventually get married. However, Kevin's demeanor shifted after marriage, revealing a more domineering side that I hadn't seen before. Kevin's sister, Jane Dalton, who is 20 years old, seems to hold a special place in his heart, perhaps due to their significant age gap. Before our marriage, I didn't pay much attention to their dynamic, assuming they got along well. However, after tying the knot, I started noticing changes in Jane's behavior. Jane frequently drops by our house unannounced, expecting to be catered to regardless of the time. She never brings any gifts or shows any appreciation during her visits. Instead, she acts as though I'm invisible, addressing only Kevin with a casual "brother, I'm here again." Despite my discomfort, Kevin always accommodates Jane's demands, even if it means inconveniencing me. For instance, during dinner, Kevin invites Jane to eat, leaving me to scramble and make do with what's available, regardless of my prior preparations. When I express my concerns to Kevin, he brushes them off, insisting that I should accommodate his sister. Kevin's preferential treatment towards Jane is evident, and it often leaves me feeling marginalized and disheartened. Despite Jane's verbal apologies, Her actions suggest she revels in Kevin's attention at my expense. Left to fend for myself during meal times, I'd often resort to leftovers, resigned to the fact that I'm on the lower rung of Kevin's priorities. This pattern repeats when Jane requests a private conversation with Kevin, prompting me and Martin to relocate, once again highlighting my secondary status in our household. As Martin and I finish our meal and head to the kitchen for cleanup, I can't help but feel the weight of Kevin's favoritism and Jane's entitlement, casting a shadow over our family dynamic. I find Kevin and Jay chatting happily on the sofa, ignoring the dishes left untouched on the dining table. Their negligence toward cleaning up suggests they see me not as a wife or sister-in-law, but more like a maid. They don't acknowledge Martin either, treating him as if a maid brought her child to work. While I'm cleaning up in the kitchen, about to take a bath with Martin, Kevin loudly calls me, despite the late hour nearing 8 p.m. He demands that I buy a cake for Jay immediately, specifying where to get it, despite the inconvenience it poses to Martin's bedtime. Jane adds to the pressure, insisting she wants it now, and Kevin rushes me, displaying his frustration at my hesitation. Knowing I'll inevitably have to go, I reluctantly agree to buy the cake, aware that a shop near the station closes at 9 p.m. As I prepare to leave, I overhear Kevin and Jane's conversation, criticizing me loudly, questioning why Kevin married me. Reluctant to leave Martin behind, I bring him along. While getting him ready, I hear Kevin's threatening tone from the living room, causing Martin to sense the tension, even if he doesn't understand the words. Suppressing my emotions, I ask Martin what kind of cake he wants, and he brightens up, expressing his preference for a fruit-loaded one. Our trip to the cake shop becomes a momentary escape from the conflict, as Martin excitedly discusses cake flavors. We reach the shop just before closing time, luckily finding the cake Jane wanted. I buy 2 cakes, including the fruit-loaded one for Martin. Returning home, I serve the cakes to Jane and Kevin, then prepare Martin's cake. However, before he can enjoy it, Jane demands it for herself, and Kevin, disregarding Martin's protests, sides with Jane, claiming his right to choose. Unable to contain my frustration, I express my dissatisfaction, prompting Kevin to threaten divorce. Martin, visibly distressed, holds my hand tightly, and after some consideration, he speaks up, expressing his love for strawberry cake, a preference he mentions while eating the cake Jane initially wanted. I feel like I've been subjecting Martin to too much. 3 adults, including myself, shouldn't be burdening a 4-year-old child like this. The moment I saw Jane reaching for Martin's cake, after hearing him express how delicious it was, I knew I had to intervene. "Martin, let's go over there," I said, leading him to another room so he could enjoy his cake in peace. Kevin, likely noticing Jane's attempt to take the cake, apologized to her for seeming stingy. As much as I wanted to retort, I held back, not wanting to expose Martin to talk of divorce. Watching him innocently eat his cake with a smile on his face was heartwarming and offered a moment of solace amidst the tension. After finishing the cake, ignoring both Kevin and Jane, we decided to have a late bath and sleep in Martin's bed. The next morning, I woke up to find Jane had already left. As I prepared to wake up Kevin and Martin for breakfast, I heard Martin crying and rushed to him. To my shock, I found his piggy bank, a gift from my father, broken, and all his saved money gone. It was part of his nightly ritual to say goodnight to the piggy bank, and last night was no different. At that time, the only people in the living room were Kevin and Jane. I asked Kevin about it, and he casually mentioned that Jane needed some money, so she took it from Martin's piggy bank, ignoring his tears. As I held Martin, feeling his pain so deeply, I couldn't help but cry with him. It hurt to see Kevin prioritize and care for Jane over our own son. I felt a surge of anger and sadness, unable to bear the sight of Martin in such distress. "Why are you making the morning so miserable? I feel awful," Kevin exclaimed. "Don't you think you've done something wrong? Martin is crying so much for the first time since we got married." I expressed my anger towards him. Kevin looked at me intensely, then went to the bedroom without a word. He returned with something in his hand, divorce papers. "If you're not happy with me, then let's divorce," he said, thrusting the papers at me before leaving the house with a loud bang. Martin, who had never cried over issues with Kevin and Jane before, must have reached his limit. He's been crying since last night, and I can't bear to see him in such pain. "Hey, Martin, should we skip daycare day?" I asked, trying to comfort him. He seemed happy at the idea of spending the day with me, replying with a loud yes and showing me a faint smile. As he brought a picture book from the shelf and sat on my lap, looking up at me with happiness, I couldn't help but think that his little heart must be full of patience. Today, we'll take it easy. I made a decision to fill Martin's heart with as much joy as possible. While I might be causing some inconvenience at my workplace, my colleagues kindly understood the situation and granted me a day off, encouraging me to spend quality time with Martin. In the morning, we went to the park where we played hide and seek, laughed in the sandbox, and gleefully slid down the slides. Returning home for lunch, Martin seemed drowsy, a rare occurrence for him. Normally, he can nap by himself, but today he fell asleep on my lap, reminiscent of his baby days. Instead of tackling household chores while Martin napped, I decided to cherish this special moment and be comforted by his peaceful sleeping face and gentle breathing. As I drifted off myself, a noise from the entrance jolted me awake. It was too early for Kevin to be home, so I felt a sense of unease. Quickly, I gathered Martin and only essentials, hiding in the bedroom closet. My heart raced as I heard footsteps approaching. Then, a familiar voice echoed through the house. It was Jane. Trembling with fear, I listened as she rummaged through drawers, muttering about something she couldn't find. After a brief call to Kevin, Jane left, locking the door behind her. Emerging from the closet, I put Martin back to bed, pondering what had just transpired. I couldn't shake the feeling that Kevin was involved somehow, and I began to question his actions. Feeling a mixture of disgust and fear towards Kevin, I hastily packed essentials for Martin and myself. By the time Martin woke up, I was ready to go. "Martin, let's go to Grandpa's place," I said, and we headed to the station, taking a train to my parents' house. Thankfully, my parents' home was nearby, and we arrived quickly. Although I hadn't informed them beforehand, they'd welcomed us with open arms, sensing something was amiss. Their pet dog immediately brought joy to Martin, and they played together happily. Feeling relieved, I confided in my parents about the unsettling events with Kevin and Jane. We discussed the possibility that Jane may have been searching for my belongings, particularly my cash cards. Reflecting on my mother's insight, I remembered my successful experience in launching an online shop for handmade goods with my friends. Before getting married, I was well known in the handmade industry, serving as the CEO of my own shop. As the business flourished, I made the decision to tie the knot. However, my priorities shifted towards raising my child, prompting me to entrust the company to my reliable friends until I settled into parenthood. Although I still hold the CEO position, I primarily work part-time from home, managing the company remotely. Surprisingly, my husband, Kevin, is unaware of my continued role as CEO, although he knows about my previous position and suspects that I've saved a decent amount of money. I've intentionally kept details about my CEO status and savings from Kevin, mainly due to his poor financial habits. Despite earning a substantial income, Kevin spends recklessly, leaving little for essential expenses. He allocates a mere $200 per month for food, insisting I become a full-time homemaker. However, I've never agreed to abandon my career entirely. Eventually, he allowed me to work part-time, but not without making me sign a post-marital property waiver, fearing I might consider divorce. Since Martin's birth, I've solely relied on the $200 food budget, using my savings to cover Martin's nursery fees and clothing expenses. I've never asked Kevin for additional financial support, leading him to assume I have substantial savings. Jane's sudden need for money aligns with Kevin's belief in my savings, likely prompting their search for my cash cards. Nevertheless, I've been quietly setting aside funds for Martin in a separate savings account. Each month, a portion of my salary is deposited directly into this account. Despite their efforts, they won't find my cash cards, as I always carry them with me, concerned about Jane's frequent visits and Kevin's allowance of them. I've decided to keep my valuables at my parents' house, storing them securely in their safe. Martin's distress over his broken piggy bank further raises suspicions. My father, visibly angered by Martin's plight, insists on contacting Kevin. However, my mother advises caution, suggesting we uncover their intentions before they fabricate excuses, potentially complicating matters further. Deciding to record their conversation, my parents, a lawyer friend, and I agree to discuss the situation calmly before taking any further action. Upon arriving home, I began preparing dinner as usual when Kevin returned. Quickly, I started recording on my phone, discreetly keeping the screen facing down to avoid detection. To my surprise, Kevin immediately asked about my cash cards upon entering. When I inquired about his sudden interest, his responses were evasive, hinting at deceit. Remaining silent seemed to frustrate Kevin, and he grew somber, demanding all my part-time earnings for his sister. Firmly, I explained that the money was for Martin's savings, not to be diverted elsewhere. Angered by my refusal, Kevin shoved divorce papers from his bag towards me, accusing me of draining his finances and devaluing our son, Martin. His words struck a nerve, prompting me to cease dinner preparations, gather the divorce papers, and take Martin's hand, heading for the door. Kevin's threat of divorce echoed behind me, but I declared I wouldn't return to a home where strangers came and went freely. Reflecting on my words later, I questioned if I had been too harsh, especially considering Jane's relationship with Kevin. Ignoring Kevin's flurry of messages and calls, I turned off my phone and sought refuge at my parents' house. Upon arrival, I shared the recording and divorce papers with my parents. Their response was clear. I should do what was best for Martin, even if it meant divorcing Kevin. However, they acknowledged the potential emotional toll it could take on Martin. As I grappled with this decision, Martin expressed hunger, and my mother swiftly prepared his favorite meal, hamburgers. Tears welled in my eyes as Martin, with a heart full of kindness, shared his happiness with us. Overwhelmed by his gesture, I couldn't contain my emotions, and my father reassured Martin that my tears were of joy. Martin's innocent remark about Jane's absence brought forth more tears, and I embraced him tightly. Witnessing this exchange, my father's eyes mirrored my emotional turmoil, highlighting the weight of the situation on our family. I turned to Martin and remarked, "Isn't it wonderful to be with family?" His surprise was evident as he questioned whether Dad had only considered Jane as family. My father gently affirmed that, indeed, it was just us: Mom, Grandpa, Grandma, and Martin. Then he asked Martin if he wanted to stay with us as part of our family. With a laugh, Martin replied, "Of course. We're family," bringing smiles to everyone's faces. As we enjoyed our meal, filled with laughter and lively conversation, I couldn't help but wonder when was the last time we had such a natural, joyous gathering. Despite my contemplation of divorce, the happiness of the moment convinced me to go through with it and inform Martin. Although discussing divorce weighed heavily on my heart, Martin seemed to understand, expressing his happiness at living as a family. He eagerly embraced our pet dog, referring to him as his younger brother, despite the dog being older. Preparing for the divorce, I swiftly contacted a lawyer, arranging to meet the next day. That night, Martin slept peacefully with my father and the dog, their faint laughter offering comfort. As I laid in bed with my mother, memories of my childhood flooded my mind, lulling me to sleep. The next day, I was inundated with over 200 calls and messages from Kevin, showcasing his emotional turmoil. Exhausted by his instability, I turned off my phone once more. Meeting with the lawyer, we formalized the divorce proceedings. The lawyer explained that Kevin had become entangled in Jane's substantial debts. Using my savings as a solution, despite Kevin's attempts to reconcile, the divorce had been finalized. Later, I received a call from Kevin, his tone markedly different, devoid of aggression. He confessed to spoiling Jane and feeling jealous of Martin. Despite his plea for reconciliation, I remained resolute in my decision. Returning to my parents' house, I decided to stay until Martin grew up. Meanwhile, I resumed my role as company president, explaining the situation to my colleagues. Subsequently, Kevin and Jane were disowned by their parents due to their debt and the divorce, now living in a cramped apartment, constantly blaming each other. However, despite their turmoil, I found solace and happiness